What's going on, Notre Dame fans? Mike Singer, Mason Plummer from blueandgold.com with the weekly recruiting wrap, bringing you recruiting news in the world of Notre Dame football on a Friday. It's March 5th, and yesterday Notre Dame landed a commitment from a guy you might have heard of, Mason, Steve Angeli from New Jersey. Monster news, big domino falling in the 2022 class for the Fighting Irish. So, Mason, let's hear your thoughts on the commitment. We'll link my video with or breaking down Angeli yesterday that we released when he committed. So make sure to give that a watch if you haven't. But Mason, let's hear your thoughts. What do you think about this commitment?
Yeah, I think it's a good pickup. I think Tommy Reese and company, they got their guy. Angeli was the first offer, and I think it goes even bigger picture than that. Angeli's a good quarterback. A lot of people think he's the safe pick. I think he has the upside as well as being safe. So that's what you're looking for. But I think a bigger picture, Bergen Catholic has a lot of talent, not only in the 2022 class, but looking forward as well to 2023, 2024. It's a really good team, Mike, that I know you and I are excited to see in the upcoming years. Jaden Gould, Jaden Bellamy on the outsides. Those can be really good corners for Notre Dame if Angeli decides to start recruiting them. Notre Dame's in good position with them already. So could there be three guys from Bergen Catholic in the 2022 class that come to Notre Dame? I think it's possible. I don't know if it's likely, but man, that'd be something if there was all three of them coming to Notre Dame.
Yeah, if you're betting a parlay, um, not that I do any betting, but Angeli you already got in the fold. Jaden Gould, who's up on the screen here, I already have a future cast pick in for him to land at Notre Dame. Jaden Bellamy is a guy who Notre Dame's been looking at for a really long time. He visited campus back in 2019 for a game. So yeah, I feel like there's a pretty good chance that Notre Dame lands all three. So you mentioned kind of looking at this from the big picture, right? Like, the talent is there. The leadership qualities are there. And like it doesn't hurt that the face of your class now, like you said, like he's got big time players on his team, not only in the short term with Gould and Bellamy, but they have a big time defensive tackle on their roster. Like you look at the past two classes in those, face of the classes, Drew Pine, Blake Fisher. Notre Dame's not recruiting anybody else from those schools, and I don't know the next time they're going to recruit from at New Canaan in Connecticut or Avon in Indianapolis. So, but Bergen Catholic, yes, I absolutely can see Notre Dame recruiting here, obviously in 2022, but in the years beyond. So it helps that Stephen Angeli is the guy for Notre Dame.
Yeah, and hopefully that becomes a pipeline. You hear Bergen Catholic, that sounds like a school Notre Dame should be recruiting at a high level, and hopefully we'll see that coming up in the future. But Mike, you mentioned recruiting, and I think this is a lot of people have been asking about wide receiver recruiting. I think having the quarterback in the class is going to be huge for wide receiver recruiting. You and I are going to be busy the next couple weeks, I guarantee you, talking about wide receivers, and maybe we'll have a couple in the fold here relatively soon if Angeli gets on the recruiting trail and really starts getting a couple of his guys he really wants in this class. So it'll be interesting to watch. Quarterbacks do a really good job generally recruiting their wide receivers that they want in the class. So we'll see if Angeli's up to the task.
Angeli will be a very good recruiter. I've already talked to him, and even in my conversations with him like a couple months ago, he was just saying, "Man, I'm ready to recruit," and he hadn't even been committed yet. But like I could sense that he wanted to commit early, not only to lock in a spot at the program he wanted to be at, which he probably knew deep down for a long time is going to be Notre Dame, but to
Right.
get in and start recruiting, he's going to be very good on the recruiting trail.
All right, Mike. Thursday, Notre Dame, one of its top defensive tackles in the 2022 class, Caleb Artis out of Queens, New York, St. Francis Prep. You see the Rivals ranking there, four-star defensive tackle, released his top seven. He included Notre Dame. He broke it down with you. What are your kind of thoughts on his breakdown of that top group, his thoughts on Notre Dame? What are you thinking?
Yeah, top seven: Auburn, Florida State, Indiana, Notre Dame, Penn State, Rutgers, and Virginia. I feel like Notre Dame's in the driver's seat in this recruitment. Mike Elston offered him, several months ago and has done a nice job staying in contact. Marcus Freeman's coming and build a strong relationship here. Mason, Notre Dame's got a chance to build a really elite defensive class, and the interior guys, artists, Anthony Lucas from Arizona, Donovan Hinish from Pittsburgh, um, some really good targets on the board for Notre Dame. And again, I think that Notre Dame um, might be the number one school in his recruitment right now. But he's going to want to get out to campus to check out Notre Dame, see if he can see himself living in South Bend. When he dropped his top 7 on Thursday, had already interviewed him for our YouTube page. So let's go ahead and cut to my interview with Artis and what he said about Notre Dame. Update us on Notre Dame. How are things going with those coaches?
Right. Right. Well, I felt like I had to put them in there for sure because I remember the first day they had offered me, and the coach Austin, he was blunt. He straight up. He said, "Listen, we love you, man, and I'm not going to be one of those schools that toot your horn and float your boat or anything like that, man. I'm gonna be straight up. I'm gonna recruit you how I want to recruit you. I'm not going to call you every day. I'll call you every weekend and all that good stuff. I'm not going to be on your body." Saying, giving you BS and all that good stuff. He was real. He was forward. He told me how he wants to utilize me, and that's one thing. But I mean, it was more than football for me with Notre Dame. Out of all these schools, I could really say that because if you know Notre Dame, then you know that they have pretty great academics. So, my family, especially my mother, she was like, "Listen, man, you got to put Notre Dame up there." And I was like, "Yeah, well, you ain't telling me nothing I don't know." so, Notre Dame was definitely a top choice. They have great academics. You go there, even if I don't make it to the league, I could definitely get a great job down the long run, wherever I go with a degree from Notre Dame. So
Another top prospect who placed Notre Dame in his top group on Thursday was Kamari Rogers from Mississippi, number 47 overall player in the country and number 6 cornerback in the land per Rivals. I mean, this is a prospect who you probably wouldn't think is going to land at Notre Dame, because how often do the Fighting Irish go into Mississippi for a top cornerback? But hey, Irish at least have a shot here. Mississippi State, Georgia, Miami, Central Florida, LSU, Ole Miss, Tennessee, A&M, Notre Dame, and Oklahoma, the top 10 schools there. So when you see Kamari Rogers place a Notre Dame in his top group, what was your reaction, Mason?
To me, it means Notre Dame's doing a really good job, and more credit to Marcus Freeman. You saw the Rivals ranking there. Every time you're looking at a Rivals 100 corner, I think that's significant, especially at Notre Dame. He's a top 50 player in the nation. So this is one of the top corners in the nation. He was already committed to LSU. LSU's still all over him, but Notre Dame's right in the thick of this. Notre Dame has a solid chance here, I think, and if you can land Kamari Rogers, that just makes the rest of the corners that you're looking at like even better options to me. So you're looking at Jaden Gould and Jaden Bellamy. To me, those aren't your number one guys as corners in the class, but they look way better if they're your second or third guy. You don't need them to be great, and I think Kamari Rogers can be great.
I might disagree with you. I think Jaden Gould is the top of the board corner guy. And then Bellamy is someone who I think is probably more of a safety at Notre Dame. So if you're looking at a DB class of like a Jaden Bellamy, Nakai Martinez, a corner from Florida, Jaden Gould, who's potentially could be even a safety, and Kamari Rogers, like that, there's a lot of exciting, possibilities there. Jair Brown is close with Kamari Rogers. So if you're looking at a 5-man DB class and that's it, like that's, got to be one of the best, in the past 15 years or something at Notre Dame. Irish were also on a Zoom call with Rogers earlier this week. I broke that news over at Blue and Gold. I guess it's not breaking big news or anything, but I posted that news earlier this week at Blue and Gold. He had a really productive call with Marcus Freeman. So keep an eye on Kamari Rogers, folks. Like we're saying, Notre Dame's got more of a shot here than people might think.
Mike, tight end recruiting is heating up. Of course, Notre Dame already has one tight end committed in the 2022 class. He was the second commitment of the class pretty early on last year, Jack Nickel out of Georgia. He's a talented kid, but I think these two are really talented as well. I don't know if it's possible Notre Dame has room for 3 tight ends in this class, but I think you can't go wrong with either Eli Raridan or we got Stays right here, the former Penn State commit. Mike, what do you like about these two guys?
Well, yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting to see kind of how this unfolds. But like you got Jack Nickel in the class, I believe he was the first tight end they offered last May, right along with Benji Gosnell, who's since committed to Ohio State. But it's a good problem to have. I don't know what is going to unfold here, but it's just kind of one of those things that it's a good problem to have. Eli Raridan, we've talked about, is like a double legacy. I guess his grandfather didn't attend Notre Dame, but I'm going to call him a double legacy because his grandfather was a strength and conditioning coach when Notre Dame won the national championship. That's Scott Raridan Sr., and then Scott Raridan Jr. was an offensive lineman for Notre Dame in the early 2000s. So, Notre Dame's looking really good for Raridan. once he starts to focus on his recruitment rather than basketball, he's in his basketball season right now, I believe. Once that kind of shifts, you have to love Notre Dame in the recruitment. And then Holden stays, a kid at Atlanta Westminster, one of the best, honestly, one of the best schools in the country. And he's a tight end, goes to such a great private institution. I mean, Notre Dame makes a ton of sense on paper, and the Irish, John McNulty and the staff have done a great job in stage recruitment. So what they do here, I don't know what it's going to end up being. What the numbers are or who's in, I don't know. But I mean, it's going to be a good problem to have, right? Or, whatever it's going to end up being, Notre Dame's going to have another strong tight end class when this 22 cycle is all said and done.
Mike, another top cornerback prospect Notre Dame is after in the 2022 class out of Texas. You see the Rivals ranking there. He's impressive. The 4-star, 5.9 ranking, 132 in the nation, 18th best corner. Mike, Notre Dame had a Zoom with him this past week. Tell us a little bit about that. I know you got some insider information on that with Terrence Brooks.
Yeah, actually, just on Thursday. Seems like everything happened in Notre Dame recruiting on Thursday. Brian Kelly on the call with Terrence Brooks and his father, Chet Brooks, who played at Texas A&M. Aggies are certainly in the mix for Brooks, but I mean, there is a long offer list. Many big-time schools from the South in there, but Brooks, I mean, you see this a lot of times with recruits whose father were big time college players play in the NFL. Like a lot of those guys, like they want their sons to go play at Notre Dame because they know the college football game and they know how important that degree is. So, Notre Dame is looking good in this recruitment. I'm not going to project them to Notre Dame at this point in time, kind of where things stand, but see his high school, Pope John Paul II. Can only imagine that's good for Notre Dame. With him attending, a school like that in Texas, the Zoom call went well based on what I'm told from those close to Brooks. Mike Mickens is doing a nice job in this recruitment. Of course, Marcus Freeman is involved as well. So Brooks is a guy who was bumped from 3-star status all the way to number 132 player in the country. So big jump from him. He's a big time player, and Notre Dame has a long list of DB prospects, talented ones too, that they're in the mix for, and Terrence Brooks certainly fits the bill. That's going to do it for this week's recruiting wrap. Appreciate you guys sticking around and watching till the end of the video. Make sure you hit the thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more Notre Dame recruiting content, and head over to blueandgold.com for all of your Notre Dame athletics coverage.